His surname is well known by anyone who follows Virginia politics. Jon Baliles grew up the son of a governor, but has carved out his own path of public service, first working for Doug Wilder, then winning a seat on Richmond City Council, and later running for mayor. These days, he's letting his fingers do the heavy lifting as the author of one of RVA's most popular Substacks. Today, we get into the weeds about the water crisis and much more with this former City Hall insider. Jon Baliles.
Hey, Katie.
Good to see you.
You too. It's been a while.
We've known each other a long time.
We have.
I want to say, let me think. I started working here in 2009, so yeah.
2009 or 2010, I think.
Yeah. And you were somewhat at that point of a City Hall insider. I don't think, you weren't on council yet, right?
I was in the planning department.
Okay, you were in the planning department. But I was like shaking you down for information and stuff back then, wasn't I?
Yeah.
Were you avoiding me?
No, never.
Okay, not really. Okay.
I can't hide from you, Katie.
Well,
you knew where to look, or especially around City Hall.
Some people learn that lesson faster than others, so maybe,
They did.
Yes. So I do remember you were a helpful resource for some guidance and where to look for things. So tell us what you're doing now. I know you have a very successful Substack, RVA 5x5.
Right.
How did that come about?
I just was looking around at the kind of disintegrating local media that's affected mid-size and even large cities all over the country, and decided that it would be valuable to people to be able to write about what was in the media and add a little twist of insider knowledge and perspective to what's going on at City Hall. A lot of times people in government will say one thing, but it needs to be translated because it's cover for something else.
Oh, yeah. I know about that.
And I thought Substack offered a good new platform. I used to blog a lot, but back in the days, 20 years ago, blogging didn't pay, and Substack kind of found that magic formula where you can pay a subscription. And now everything, 20 years ago, HBO was a subscription. Now everything is a subscription.
Right.
Hulu, Disney.
Anything good,
whatever.
right? If
Yeah,
it's good.
exactly.
So, but how many other people do you have working with you on this, or is it just all driven by you?
It's just me.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, and you have ads and such on there, so you're
It's completely subscription driven.
yeah.
Yeah, you can put ads on there, but I don't really do that.
Yeah, that's great. Well, good for you. What has been the response? Because I know that as you sort of advertise it, you call it like insightful, thoughtful, honest. Have people been drawn in to that type of reporting?
I think they have. Like I said, the local media across the country has kind of diminished a lot in recent years, but we're a little bit fortunate in Richmond in that we're fortunate and unfortunate. We're unfortunate that all these problems keep occurring, but we're fortunate in that the local media landscape around here has been doing a great job of digging and trying to get information. Not always successfully, because this, City Hall stonewall sometimes, but
Right.
they had been digging. So to be able to use what they find and add my perspective on it, I think is helpful to some people. And I get emails every week from people saying, hey, you need to look into this, you need to look into that.
That's exciting.
Yeah,
I remember
so-
those emails. 1 in 5 actually might have something that's like really worth the dig, but it's just exciting to know people like want you to do that, that they're
Well-
trusting you to be that voice.
Yeah, and I think, over the years, I think I've kind of earned that trust to be a straight shooter and an honest player. So I hope I've earned that.
Yeah, well, we're going to hit some of the topics that you've been talking about, because I think the reason we brought you on was sort of, we'd love to have somebody who is not actively campaigning for anything that can sort of give us some, a bird's eye view, context, thought, insight. So we'll just start with, I think, the story that, is sort of going to catch on here in a couple of months really, really heavily, which is the statewide races in Virginia. Obviously, only one of 2 states that has a gubernatorial race and an off-year election, and Virginia's is coming up in November. You're looking at the stage now is set. The primaries are done. What are your thoughts on how this is going to go?
Well, I don't get too into deep end with the state politics. You know, I kind of grew up with it, so I moved away from it after a while. But I mean, from my perspective, I think the Democratic ticket is a better resource. They have, at least from the reports I've seen, they have a lot more money. You know, the Republican side of the ticket has had the issue with Governor Youngkin calling out John Reed, which I think is, you know, when Governor Wilder was on your show, he called it a brazen or something a little sharper than that.
Arrogance.
But, yeah, and I think that's going to hurt the Republican ticket. But you know, it's late June.
A lot can happen.
There's a long way to go.
Yeah. Well, I think since we're on the topic, one issue that was of interest to you, because I know you've been working on a story about it, would be the Democratic primary for lieutenant governor, in which our former mayor, LeVar Stoney, seemed to be, you know, from all accounts leading up to the primary, a pretty big contender. He was definitely going to be a tight race. There was a lot of candidates. But it seems from the math and what we've seen that the reason he lost was because of Richmond voters.
Yeah, that was pretty astounding.
Which, I mean, politically is a shock, right? I mean, you would think the area that you represented for 8 years, where you are most well known, which really, you know, is a big city in Virginia, would be your safe bet, not your Achilles heel, you know?
Yeah, I was listening to a Virginia politics podcast because they were talking about the race, and Graham Moomaw was talking about it, the reporter from the Richmonder, and he said that Hashmi got 10,500 more votes than Stoney did in the city alone, which is pretty astounding. And then he also said if Stoney had just cut that gap a little bit, in half perhaps, he'd be the nominee for lieutenant governor. So for a locality to do that to somebody that served for 8 years is pretty unprecedented, at least around here.
I mean, you didn't see that coming.
No, I thought LeVar was going to be the nominee for sure.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody saw it coming.
Right. I mean, he was well funded. I know he spent a lot of time in Northern Virginia, and I know he earned a lot of votes there. I guess he maybe overlooked the fact that Richmond would. I mean, I don't know how you could have predicted what happened here, but now that it has happened, I guess the question I have, and maybe there is no quantifiable answer to this, but I would love to know, what was it, one singular issue that made Richmonders turn against him, or was it the cumulative 8 years? Like, what was it that?
I think it was cumulative, and there were a couple of issues that hit the sharpest. One was the first casino. After the first casino, Stoney said, the people have spoken, we must respect their decision. And then a month later, he said, we're going to put the casino back on the ballot.
Bring it back up again.
And it lost a lot worse the second time.
Right.
And it was, you know, the casino supporters were caught on the radio, on their own radio shows, saying all kinds of anti-Semitic and racist things. And it just left a really bad taste in everyone's mouth. And then, you know, you can't overlook the water crisis. I mean, everybody knows that Danny Avul is not responsible for the meltdown on January 6th. Doesn't matter who would have won for mayor.
It would have melted down.
It wouldn't have been their fault.
Right.
And nobody would have stopped it because they didn't know to look for it. And it just comes from years of deferred maintenance and pursuing bigger, shinier projects as opposed to the water plant. The water plant's unsexy. It's not visible to the public. You know, it's behind fence and barbed wire because of security. But it's got life's essential need, which is water.
Right.
And when people go to the tap and they can't get it, they're upset. And they registered their voice loud and clear last week.
Yeah, I mean, I've had him on the show, and I sort of asked in 3 or 4 different ways if he felt any accountability for that, and it was a hard no. You know, he really didn't take any responsibility when I talked to him about it, which, you know, I think had been asked multiple times, and I wonder if he had sort of owned up to that in some ways. You know, would there have been more more forgiveness on that?
I don't know. I think people were pretty angry, and first of all, there was no accountability or responsibility taken for anything that went wrong when LeVar was mayor. He was always pointing the finger at somebody else, some other cause. People can see through that, and they saw through it. And when the water thing happened, it was obvious who was responsible. But then a couple months later, it happened again in April and again in May, and that's starting to get on Danny's shoulders. But it reminded people that we shouldn't have been at that point in the first place.
Right.
And then
his clock is ticking. I mean, we talked about that too, Doug Wilder.
But as far as last week goes, they went to the people went to the polls and said they put Avula on notice, because what they're saying is fix it, or we are not going to support you no matter what you do, whether that's re-election, whether that's higher office.
Right.
If Avula follows the Stoney playbook, he's going to be met
his career is going to stop here.
He's going to be met with the same anger and result. In the museum district where I live, Senator Hashmi, who won the nomination, got 960 votes in the 2 precincts. LeVar Stoney got 59.
Yeah, that's a stunning
number.
That's
16-1.
That's a stunning number. It's a resounding message.
That is a repudiation.
Yeah.
And that is anger for having to go through all of this. And they've put not just Mayor Avula, but they put City Council on notice.
Well, let me ask you this. I know you were initially a consultant for him, right?
I was.
Yes, and also
advisor.
Endorsed him.
I did.
That 2016 race was a very crowded field. And I wanted to say, I'm sidebarring just a little bit because I do have curiosity about the untold story of how you withdrew from that race. So you were an opponent of Stoney's in that mayoral campaign, and it was fairly close to the election when you withdrew, right?
Correct.
It's like a month or two out.
That was a week or 10 days.
But you had run a good campaign. You were well funded. Like, what was the discussion of why you should withdraw?
Well, if you remember that, so you're right, it was a crowded race.
Yeah.
Kind of like the lieutenant governor primary. There were 6 people, but 3 main contenders.
Right.
Kind of like what happened in 2016. And
Joe Morrissey,
Jack Berry, Stoney, and Jack Berry were the top 3. And the winner doesn't have to get a majority. The winner just has to get more votes than number 2.
Right.
And at the time, everybody was worried about Morrissey squeaking in with 25-30% of the vote because it split so many other ways. And people looked at that and didn't think that was such a good idea, and I was one of them.
Right. So in order to block Morrissey from becoming mayor, you took one for the team and withdrew from the race, and then pledged your loyalty to Stoney endorsed him as the candidate.
I did.
And then was there an arrangement at that point that he would bring you on to help him, or? No,
but there was the assumption on my part and a lot of other people's that Stoney was new to elected office. He had been Secretary of the Commonwealth under Governor McAuliffe, but he was new to elected office. He'd never held an executive leadership position, and he wasn't that familiar with city government. And I'd worked for Mayor Wilder. I was in the planning department. I was on city council. And there really was an opportunity there for a while for Stoney to become a impactful, transformational, new kind of mayor. And it unfortunately turned out to be he was more focused on the politics and the photo ops than fixing things like the water plant. So, did you have a definitive parting of ways? Was there like a I'm done with you kind of moment, or did you just sort of ease out? It was mutual. Okay. Both of you guys were sick of each other. Yeah. Okay. And then what part of his term was that? Was it in the first term, second? It was after the first year. After the first year. Mm-hmm. Okay. So it was clear to you in that first part of time that was not the direction you wanted the city to go. Yeah. Well, I knew that number one, he was going to be a political mayor rather than a transformational mayor or an impactful mayor. And, I'm not going to talk to a blank wall if nobody's going to listen.
Right. So does that change how you feel about withdrawing from that race? Do you still feel like withdrawing was the right decision?
Oh, absolutely.
To prevent
no
more
question.
Okay.
But as I said, we lost the opportunity, or I should say, Stoney lost the opportunity to create a dynamic, exciting resume on which he could run for anything. And he didn't do that. He played the safe game, the political game, and when you do that and nothing's ever your fault and things start to go wrong, then people pick up on that, and they did. It just was bad timing for him.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I assume that you two are not in contact anymore. You've kind of become a critic, and I'm sure he's not terribly happy about that.
Well, it's life in politics.
Right.
If you can't take the heat, then you shouldn't be in the kitchen.
Do you think he will see this loss as an exit from politics, or do you think he'll reinvent into something else?
Oh, it's entirely possible he could run again in 4 years for lieutenant governor. He could move to Northern Virginia and run for Congress. He could swear politics off altogether. He's a new father. He may find family life and not the grind of politics is what he wants. So I have no way of knowing, but time will tell. And people can always rebound in politics. So,
do you? Your own political instincts are strong. You grew up the son of a governor, as you said. You'd been on city council. You've been around this world, this life, campaigns an awful lot. What do you think was the misjudgment with him? Because you did, see promise there at the beginning.
I don't know. I think maybe sometimes people that want to do the political thing want to do the safe thing. And if you look at Mayor Wilder's term as mayor, it was very much a roller coaster, and he was disruptive on purpose. But if you look at there's a thing called a SEA report, a Service Effort and Accomplishment report, that is done every few years by the city auditor. It's basically a poll of are you happy with city services? Are you happy with the city? And even though Wilder was considered disruptive, when he left office, the SEA report found that 81% of the people thought Richmond was headed in the right direction.
Wow. I can't imagine that number today. I have to be honest.
I can't imagine 81% of Richmonders agreeing on anything.
No, me neither. That's a shock. Wow.
And when the last poll was taken in 2022, I believe, it was 46%.
Yeah, wow. That's fascinating.
And I think if you took it today with all the water crises, I think it would be a lot lower than 46.
Yeah.
So the Mayor Avila has a lot of fixing to do.
Yeah. Well, let's switch.
Whether he likes it or not.
Switch from old mayor to new mayor. Wilder and I discussed this a bit as well, but and you're doing extensive research, FOIAs. I mean, you're getting in the weeds. You're getting into the granular stuff about the water crisis, which I really appreciate, because I don't think anyone really knows how this whole system even works. You don't really know how it works until it's broken. Right. And then you go back and you're like, well, how does that water get from that plant to my faucet? Right. And you have to really think about it. But do you think that the grace period for the current mayor is close to expiring, in terms of there was some patience at the beginning, because yes, he inherited this problem, but it seems that it's not fixed, and it's been 6 months and I don't know that the confidence of Richmonders is high that he has a handle on this. Do you feel like he has a handle on this?
I think he's getting acquainted with how big of an issue it is. I'm not sure whether he has a handle on it. He is aware of the severity of the problem, and I think he's pretty aware that people are on edge.
Mm-hmm.
When they wake up, they turn on their faucet. They're not necessary. If they don't think it's going to come on, then they're going to get really upset in a hurry because the state's running out of patience.
Right.
I mean, they said that in their notice of violation a week or two ago, and they said, this can't continue for a water facility of this size of city and how important it is. So, if something happens and we get another boiled water advisory, you may see a move by the governor to come in and say, okay, I'm putting people in charge, which is why the regional water discussion is so important.
Which becomes a real black mark on your leadership, resume, right? I mean, if you get overtaken by the state, that's not a good look.
Yeah, and people will understand how we got here, but they're for instance, the filter issue in May, the clogged filters, that never should have happened. That should have been on somebody's checklist back in January, and apparently it was, but they last cleaned the filters in March,
mm-hmm.
and then they hadn't done it for 2 months. And the state pointed out that two other localities also took in water on those days, and their systems were fine because they had clean filters. So it's the little things that really mean a lot, especially when people are on edge.
That's what I was going to ask you. So without getting too granular, because I don't want to put anyone to sleep, and water's sleepy. Let's face it. Nerds like us can appreciate.
I can get granular.
Yes,
if you need.
I know you
can. Boring details.
I know you can. But in terms of just like a broad overview, is the problem so, enormous that it's going to take, heaven and earth to fix it, or can it be fixed with modifications and updates and deferred maintenances that should have happened? Like, do we need a wrecking ball to just come in and like level this plant and start over, or can you find good leadership and fix some of these systems with, I don't want to say with ease, but like a reasonable timeline? Is there such thing?
Well, you definitely don't want to wreck it and start over. I mean, it's
mm-hmm.
just it's an it's an astronomically big expense.
Mm-hmm.
Part of our plant's 100 years old, the other part is 75 years old. So
mm-hmm.
it's an old facility, but the changes that need to happen can happen, but the city can't be afraid to ask for help from our regional partners and friends, who also happen to be water customers.
Mm.
So they are dependent on city water coming through that plant and going out through the network. And if we need help from Henrico or Hanover or Chesterfield or Powhatan or the state or whoever, the city has to make sure that we have the assistance that we need to make sure it doesn't happen again. Because like I said, if it happens again, people are going to be out of patience.
Mm-hmm.
And if it happens again and somebody finds out that the city shunned help from somebody else, then they get 100% of the blame.
Mm-hmm.
And the more eyes and ears and brains you have on a situation like that, the better.
So you're saying regional cooperation is part of solving the problem?
It is, but in the meantime, until we get to a possible arrangement in that regard, we shouldn't be afraid to ask for help, to say, hey, can you lend some expertise?
Mm-hmm.
It's like calling a temp agency.
Yeah.
Hey, I need some help for a short period of time.
Do we still not have the brains in there that we need?
Well, I don't know, but the filter incident shows that we don't.
Mm-hmm.
And that happened 4.5 months after the meltdown. So
right. There has to be people in the state.
And the state said that specifically in their notice of violation, is this should not have happened.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I mean, as you said, water is not something that is taken lightly, and outrage will flow if this continues.
Absolutely.
And, as someone who has young children, and, it is a source of anxiety. I mean, you don't realize how valuable it is until you don't have it. And then, it really becomes a matter of like basic government function that you expect to be there.
Well, and beyond the human need for it, for the residents that pay a lot of money for water,
which is high.
Yeah. We are not going to be able to even think about attracting economic development to this, not just the city, but the region, because the whole region gets a bad name if we can't provide water, and it keeps popping up on Google. And you have a CEO that says, you know what, let's knock them off our short list. Great quality of life.
But we don't want to deal with water problems.
But we need water.
Yeah.
And we're not moving to a place that can't provide water either for
that's
our business or for our employees.
An impact I hadn't thought of yet because I'm selfishly focused on myself.
Well, you should focus on yourself first.
I'm just kidding.
But
no,
it is a long-term impact.
I just hadn't broadened my thought to that level. But you're right. Like, why would like an Amazon or a big company want to be tied to an area where it's insecure with water? You know, it's not wise. All right. Well, we'll button up on the city politics for now, and we're going to take a break and be right back. All right, now I want to talk about some of your political upbringing and then some of the things you've sort of learned along the way from having the various vantage points in politics that you've had. I mean, you started watching politics like as a child because of your dad, who was a governor, right? And before that, he was senator, right?
He got elected to the House of Delegates on my fifth birthday.
Wow. So really little. Yeah. Yes. And then by the time you were 16, you were in the governor's mansion. Is that right?
He was in the House for 6 years, then he was Attorney General for 4, and then he was elected governor in '85.
What was that like growing up with somebody in politics? What were you thinking?
Well, to us it was normal because we didn't have anything for comparison. It was different. We knew it was different because you saw how your friends lived, and they weren't in commercials or had to go to ice cream socials or political events and stuff like that, like we did when we were kids. But it was just kind of the way it was normal to us.
Yeah.
Just the way we expected.
Was it hard to be on your best behavior all the time?
It was.
Yeah.
Very hard.
I bet. Because I bet sometimes you just wanted to do something bad. I mean, you can't really do that when everybody's watching.
Yeah, well, as Eddie Murphy once said, I fractured a minor law once or twice.
No. Yeah, so you get to the governor's mansion, and then you were there for 4 years, so 10 to 14, right?
15 to 19.
Oh, 15 to 19. Okay.
Yep.
Because it was 1986, right?
86 to 90.
Yeah, and then UVA after that. What were you thinking about your own career at that point? Were you always sure you wanted to follow?
Oh, no.
No. Okay.
By the time I was, heading to college, I absolutely swore off politics.
And then
I would have nothing to do with it and wasn't involved, wasn't active, wasn't engaged or reading about it. It was
abhorrent.
Yeah, it was really kind of just a black hole for me. I just didn't want anything to do with it.
Is that because it was forced on you and you were kind of sick of it?
Well, it's just, it does kind of wear you down. And I was just, I was a kid and a teenager. It really wears you down as the politician.
Right.
But no, I just, it was not my choice to want to be involved.
And then at what point did you find yourself back in politics? I mean, it would later be a run for city council, a run for mayor. I mean, now you write about a lot of politics, so it's clearly been the path. But what?
Well, it was a kind of a slow, winding path to get there. I bought a house in the museum district, and purely by luck, and then I got involved with my neighborhood association because they needed somebody to do their website, and I was on that board for probably 10 years, and I went to work for Mayor Wilder in 2008, and I got inside City Hall, and I was amazed at what he was doing and how much the city was working behind the scenes, and the changes that he was bringing, the way the public safety and the police worked back then, where crime came down to levels that, as a lifelong Richmonder, nobody who's lived here like I have, since the 70s, would have believed that you could go from 90 murders a year down to 36 or whatever it was. I can't remember. And it just, violent crime was down across the board. I heard your interview with Mayor Wilder, and he was talking about the success they had. And one of the things that I remember so vividly is that one of the big chores that they wanted to do was if there was a shooting or a killing, they wanted to prevent a revenge from happening, because then it just spirals out of control and then it's back and forth. And one of the things, they had built such trust with the community through the community policing and Chief Monroe, that when people were being sought after, either for a murder or a shooting, a lot of times family members would call the police and say, I can get them to come in, or I know where they are, just don't hurt them. And a dangerous situation de-escalated, because there was that two-way trust. And it's just, it was amazing. So I got off onto a tangent there, but that was kind of when, working for Wilder, I realized that the city was changing for the better.
Inspiring, I imagine, to work.
It was, and I'd known Wilder since I was a kid, so we always had a good relationship. And seeing that from the inside, when Wilder chose not to run for re-election, I switched over to the planning department after he left, because I wanted to stay involved. I wanted to be on the inside. And I was there for 4 years, and then I saw an opportunity to run for city council and squeaked by 20 votes. Yes,
I remember that. Bruce Tyler was, and he had been there a while. That was not an easy person to unseat.
6 years,
Yeah. So Wilder sort of inspired you probably to, continue on the path. Once you got on city council, from that vantage point, did you see things differently, or did you have a different understanding of city government during that period of time?
Well, the legislative side is always the slower side. You have to be deliberate. You have to understand what the issue is and figure out the best way to get there is not necessarily all at once. Sometimes
incremental.
It takes steps to get there.
Sometimes Richmond feels like it's standing in its own way, and I don't know if that's just my feeling. I'm, someone who's covered the city of Richmond a long time. I sometimes just see progress impeded by, either a lack of energy or a lack of awareness, or I feel like sometimes the city stands in its own way. Did you feel like being on city council was at times frustrating in that regard? Like, I wish we could move forward faster. Did you ever feel like that?
Well, yeah. I mean, you always get that to some degree, but the probably the biggest frustration was and still is the lure of the big shiny project. All of our problems are going to be fixed with one arena or one stadium, and it's going to bring in so much money. All we have to do is invest hundreds of millions of dollars of taxpayer money, and it will pay dividends in return over the next 30 years. And that's great, on paper and with nice, colorful presentations, but that's not the way it works. I mean, it's 1 yard at a time. Maybe occasionally you get a 5 or 10 yard pass, but in city government and local government, there's never the long bomb, to use the football analogies, that can fix everything that the city needs fixed.
It doesn't seem like historically those have even gotten to fruition, though. I mean, what have we actually done? I mean, the stadium is still not done. Navy Hill was a start-stop. A casino twice failed. The Coliseum didn't happen. I mean, it's like we say these things, but we spend a lot of time talking about them.
Right, and then that's the problem.
Then they don't happen.
We spent more than 2 years wasting time on Navy Hill to build an arena without a tenant. VCU wasn't going to play there. We don't have a hockey team. We don't have an NBA franchise. Who is going to fill the arena? It's not going to be Bruce Springsteen and Beyonce every weekend. You know, why spend $600 million on a Coliseum with no tenant? We spent more than 2 years talking about the casino. Casino was going to bring in $30 million a year. Everything the city could want was going to be paid for by people going and spending money at the casino. You know, Dwight Jones did it with the Shockoe Bottom baseball plan.
Or the Redskins Park.
Redskins Park. Well, the Redskins Park came to fruition, and all the projections that said it would pay for itself, none of them came true.
Right. It was supposed to fund education, right? Wasn't it supposed to fund Richmond Public Schools?
All kinds of good things.
Yeah.
And it funded none of them.
Yeah.
And that's just, you know, and meanwhile, it takes 8 years to get a piece of equipment for the water plant that when it finally failed in January, it didn't work. It was supposed to be replaced last year after 8 years. And we get what we get. And that's what happens when you focus on the big things.
Is that because in a mid-sized city, a mayor is always going to be looking ahead to their next political ambition, so they have to have some kind of legacy marker project that they can point to, and is that the pattern? Like anybody that takes that office is always going to be looking at the next office. No one's ever thinking like my career stops here as Richmond mayor. You know what I mean?
Well, I guess that's the mentality of some politicians. My dad always used to say the best political strategy is doing a good job. If you do a good job and people are thankful, they will support you, whether you run for higher office or
the same office again
for re-election. It doesn't matter. But if they think you're helping them, even if you come up short sometimes, then, you know, if they think you're trying, they're going to support you. If they don't think you care, they're not going to support you. We saw that last week.
Yeah. I will say that about Doug Wilder. You know, no matter how controversial some of his decisions were, you know, at 94, you can still tell that he cares, which is just, you know, it is refreshing in a way to just experience somebody who still has that commitment, even though he's not in office and not running for office. So you can understand how he was so successful by that measure. If that's the measure, he still cares at 94. So that's interesting. Well, you're still very plugged into City Hall politics, and as obvious from your writing, what needs to be fixed there to get things away from that model of focusing on a shiny project? How can you fix that?
You can. You have to. I mean, so far, Mayor Avila is kind of following the Stoney playbook, which is, you know, everything's fine. You know, we're working on fixing it, and they say that repeatedly, and then
something breaks.
We find out that the filters that should have been cleaned every couple of weeks hadn't been cleaned for 2 months, and it caused another boil water advisory. Sooner or later, people stop believing you when you say you're really trying hard. You have to demonstrate performance and prove that what you're doing is in the best interest of the city, not of your political career.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope he gets that, because if he doesn't, people are going to associate him with the same kind of attitude, which is everything's fine, don't worry, there's nothing wrong. I'll give you an example. The last October, Stoney's chief administrative officer went before, I think it was the finance committee of city council, it may have been the whole city council, and he had a chart and projected by 2030 the city would be facing a $149 million deficit in the budget every year. $149 million. The interim chief administrative officer, who just left to go back to Newport News, at a presentation 2 months ago, said that deficit in 2030 is now $319 million.
Wow.
And she and the city's budget director both said, we are spending beyond our means. So how are we going to close a $319 million budget deficit in 4 years? Probably real estate taxes, probably fees, hopefully some economic development. That is an alarm bell, 4-alarm fire that city council and the mayor need to step up and say, okay, we're going to make sure that what we are spending money on, we're getting value for. If not, we're going to cut spending. Because otherwise, I think it's 57%.
What are we spending money on?
Well, this is a good time to take a look at it and reevaluate
Open the books and see
everything. Because if 57%, I believe it's 57% of city revenue comes from real estate taxes. And if we have to close a $300+ million budget deficit, it's going to fall on the homeowner, property owners. And rents are going to go up, taxes are going to go up, people are going to move out, and then all of a sudden you've got, the city's, in some ways, the city's already becoming unaffordable.
Right.
And this would be throwing gasoline on the fire if the attitude is, well, we'll just have to find a way.
Right. If you wait to the last minute, that's going to be the default.
Yep.
Yeah.
Can't wait till 2030 to figure it out.
Is anyone talking about that?
I am.
Well, I hope somebody's listening. Because that does seem, like you said, a 4-alarm fire, and we're not that far away from that.
I know.
Yeah.
4 years away.
Yeah. Well, that dismal picture.
Sorry.
Is a good place to take a break.
Reality is, you know what?
We'll leave that gray rain cloud, and we're going to take a break and be right back. So, can we ever expect that you would run for mayor again?
I wouldn't hold your breath.
Is that a hard no, or is that sort of like maybe?
I wouldn't hold your breath, but one thing I learned about being in politics is you never say never. And it depends on Mayor Avila's performance. If he turns it around and really starts addressing the issues that are this city is structurally facing, not way beyond water, the finances, the finance department is such a mess. Here we are last week of June, and everybody's still waiting for a rebate check that was supposed to be mailed in February.
Right. Right.
And
there's a whole new zoning thing going on. There's like permitting issues. There's a lot of things. It's a lot of things.
And you can't just wave a magic wand, but he has to show progress, that he's making an earnest effort and having some results. If he doesn't, then he will have people run against him.
Are you going to be one of them?
I seriously doubt it would be me, but I will never say never. But it's too important. The city is too important to just pretend that problems don't exist.
Yeah. Are you enjoying the role of being able to still be connected but being sort of the advocate, the voice for these problems to be heard? Does it feel like constraining that you can't actually get in there and fix it, or does it feel rewarding that you're able to say what you want to say?
Well, it's definitely gives me a chance to be more open and honest about the issues, because I've dealt with them. I've sat up on the dais. I know what it's like to sit through a city council meeting and negotiate, and I know what it's like to work in the mayor's office. So, it's just a question of whether or not things get fixed. People, I don't know if Danny can fix everything, but he's got, like I said, he's got to show the effort. He's not going to be able to just, like I said, wave a wand, but
yeah,
I think it's a tough road, but it's not an impossible path. So, and I'm rooting for him, but I'm going to call balls and strikes from my vantage point.
Yeah.
I don't want to keep paying more real estate taxes. I don't want to keep paying higher water bills. I want the water to turn on when I need it. So I'm rooting for him. His success is my success. It's your success.
Right.
But I'm going to be honest with him. And, some people, I'm not saying the mayor's like this. I'm just saying some people don't like to be told the honest truth. They want to be told what they want to be told to make them feel better. I don't think Danny's like that, but he's still got a lot of people around him that work for Stoney that are like that, and they don't want to tell him bad news.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think, like I said, at a certain point, you know, the honeymoon phase ends, and you're just left with fixing these problems, and there seems to be a lot. Do you think Richmond is moving in the right direction? Do you from where you sit, what are the things that need to, obviously water is needs number one in your book. You write about it a lot. Beyond water, what are the other things that Richmond is not doing right now?
You mentioned permitting. That's a mess. The finance department's a total disaster, and the same person's been running it for 4 years, and there's mistake after mistake after mistake, and next week she gets a 12% raise. I think it's 12%. You know, we need people in there that know what they're doing, that don't have to come to city council every couple of months and explain why they rebate checks didn't make it, or why they sent out tax bills to people instead of to mortgage companies or banks. We don't need 66,000 misidentified or mistaken personal property tax bills sent out. You know, all of these things keep happening over and over. We need better customer service with restaurants. When the meals tax fiasco broke out into the news, you know, at first the City Hall reaction was, well, it's only a handful of cases. It turned out to be hundreds. And that's not customer service. Right. That's not getting to the bottom of it and saying, we're going to do it, we're going to listen to you.
What I hear you
totally reactive and nothing proactive.
What I hear you saying is accountability is not where it needs to be. And what I hear you saying is that might require you to make some difficult changes and decisions that might be, for the short term, unpopular, but in the long term result in better results.
Well, as I mentioned, Wilder was disruptive, and 81% of the people thought the city was moving in the right direction. If there's not some disruption, then nothing is going to change to the degree where a majority of people, much less 80%, are going to get behind what's happening.
Yeah.
And, you know, Danny can be disruptive. Doesn't mean you have to, you know, throw things and be ugly. It just means you are not afraid to change. And if he shows progress on that, not only is he going to get reelected, he could run for something else later on if he wants to, because people will say he fixed X, Y, and Z.
I think people just want to know you're doing anything. I mean, even if you make the wrong choice, if you tried something and you actually, you know, lifted something heavy, okay, maybe you dropped it, but like at least you tried to get something going. You know, I do feel like there's a certain forgiveness as long as people know that you're not just wasting their money, you know?
And most people will support you if they can see that you're trying. And if you know, what's the old saying? If at first you fail, then get up and try again.
Yeah.
And, you know, not everything is going to succeed, but to show that the effort is there to fix what needs to be fixed, sooner or later you're going to hit the right formula. And it, like I said, it may be incremental or slow, step by step, but you'll get there. Let
me ask you this. Is there any one person in the city of Richmond, I mean, this is absolutely leaving the current mayor out of things. Is there one person in the city that you would say, gosh, they'd be the best mayor? I'd love it if they were in office. Is there anybody that you think...
Doug Wilder.
Yeah, I had a feeling you might say that.
I know that's going to stir some people up.
I know you might say that.
It's true.
Yeah.
He's not afraid.
Yeah.
He's not afraid to fail. He's not afraid to be disruptive. Yeah. And he doesn't care if people call him names, because it may upset their apple cart what he's trying to change.
Yeah.
And you know, it's not just the leaders that have kind of forsaken accountability in the last 8 years, but that has permeated down to some of the workers. You know, most of the frontline workers at City Hall and city government are really hard workers, and they try. But once the lack of accountability is seen at the top, then other people see okay to replicate it. And you look at I think it was 2 weeks ago, there was a story in the paper about a city employee who set up 3 businesses.
Oh, yeah, that one hurt.
And the city found that $2
million, yeah,
went to his businesses. Mm-hmm. And the biggest expense was $75,000 for 8 custom-made cabinets. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you can't catch that over 4 years,
right, then
you really are blind to what's going on.
Yeah,
that all of that needs to start being ferreted out.
Yeah. As I said, accountability seems to be the message I'm hearing on that. What about city council? Like, do you feel like there needs to be shakeups there? Are they effective right now?
Well, I think they've got 3 new members who are kind of shaking the tree a little bit. Mm-hmm. I've been impressed with what I've seen from some of their questions and some of their stances. And I think you've always got moving factions on city council, depending on what you want to get done. And I don't know if there's any type of alignment as far as we'll do whatever the mayor says, or we won't do whatever the mayor says.
Right.
That
resistance,
that automatic
right,
fallback position. So I think that the mayor needs to cultivate that a little bit more. And I think the first big test of that is going to be the discussions about regional water. Mm-hmm. Is the mayor going to be able to convince city council to say this is a good idea? Or is the mayor, I don't know the answer. Is the mayor saying he'll meet, but is he reluctant? And will city council need to bring him along? I just don't know, because we haven't had the discussion yet. So I think that will be interesting to watch, to see who lines up either for some type of water commission or actual regional authority. What does that do? What does that mean for the city, for debt, for all kinds of different things? We've got plenty of regional successes. The airport, huge success. Convention center, big success. Regional boards run with regional transparency and financing. They don't get a whole lot of direct money from the city. The convention center gets hotel tax money from the city. So those are successes. The Central Virginia Transportation Authority, huge success.
Yeah.
Funding a lot of projects that the city would never have otherwise.
See, and I hear you talking, and you clearly convey that you still care a lot about all of this. And so when you say that's sort of the measure of, a successful person in politics, that's why I ask about your future, because I still hear it in you, like that you want to be in this game. So you don't?
I want to make sure that Richmond's successful and we're not paying through the nose for it.
Yeah.
I want people to have.
But you don't think you still have to scratch that itch?
I don't have an itch.
Really?
I really don't.
I mean, John, I have a hard time. I hear you, and I definitely hear somebody that has interest beyond just being an observer.
If Richmond is successful, then I'll be ecstatic. And if I don't have to,
but you want everything to write about.
If I don't have to,
what are you gonna do with the Substack?
I'll retire and get a beach house or something. I don't know. I'll figure out something. But if somebody else can get it done and I can be a part of it, great. But the bottom line is we get these problems fixed and make Richmond everything we know it can be. Because right now, there's more wrong with it that needs to be fixed than what's going right.
Well, I super appreciate you sitting down with me.
Absolutely.
And I hope our conversation makes the Substack. I hope I get a mention in there.
Of course.
I hope so. Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks, Katie.
Yeah. We'll see you next time. Untold is a production of WTVR CBS 6. Executive produced by Mike Bergazzi and Katie Beck, directed by Nick Maharaj and Brock Taylor, and edited by Curtis Akers. Follow the show on Instagram at Untold_WTVR.